All right, glad the video is working. Looks like we've got a few people on. So hello, everybody. I am Melissa Stangl. I'm one of the founding partners of Soltara Healing Center. I am here in Costa Rica, and I am chatting with our head of integration support, Sean Chiddy. So here at Soltara, we really strive to offer in-depth integration support in conjunction with plant medicine. And our goal is to help bridge the gap for people who are working with plant medicine and to really help them integrate the experience and then integrate themselves, becoming balanced in mind, body, and spirit. So today, as I mentioned, I'm very excited to have Sean Chiddy here. Sean is a psychotherapist and head of our integration support. He has several years experience supporting people before, during, and after their ayahuasca experiences. And he's an all-around wonderful guy. So thank you, Sean, for joining us. And maybe you want to share a little bit more about your background and what drew you to this work.
Hi, thank you very much for the introduction, Mel, and it's great to be able to join you here virtually from Peru, where I'm living, a few hours away from there, from Soltara. And yeah, so I've been working with Soltara now for, well, it must be coming up towards approaching a year, I guess. I can't remember exactly when I started there anymore because time has become a bit of a vague concept during this lockdown. But yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been working for a few years doing integration support for people working with ayahuasca. I started at another center down in Peru and then came over to Soltara, as I mentioned, last year. And so prior to that, I was working as a psychotherapist for now, again, about the last 14 years, I suppose. I started in Australia where I qualified as a psychologist and I was working in general mental health there, working with people experiencing things like depression, anxiety conditions, PTSD, trauma, and a variety of other problems that they wanted support for. I also worked a bit in pain management and also in an employee assistance program, so a company that provides support for other companies for the mental health of their employees. And I worked in the immediate response team there. So basically people would ordinarily ring up to book an appointment, but if they, while they were on the phone to the booking team, were really distressed or had just been through something really traumatic like an assault or something was really distressing them in the moment, they would get put through to our team. And so we would support them on the spot. And so then I went on to live in the UK for a while, did some further study there in cognitive behavioral psychotherapy, and I was working for the National Health Service in the UK. And around about coming up to 10 years ago now, I started working with ayahuasca. And, you know, as people who've had ayahuasca for themselves will know, it's a very compelling experience. And it really was a turning point in my life. And I started attending as many ceremonies as I could and working a lot with ayahuasca and also peyote and some other plant medicines like that. And, you know, these ceremonies became a really essential aspect of my life. And so when the opportunity came up to head down to Peru and start working in an ayahuasca center, I jumped at the opportunity. And while I was there, I started developing ways of integrating the psychotherapy skills with working with ayahuasca. And that's how I've come to be where I am now. So I feel very, very privileged to be working for Soltara and really privileged to be able to provide integration support.
Well, we're really privileged to have you. You certainly bring quite the breadth and depth of experience to the work. And I think most of the community that has had the privilege to work with you can really attest to that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so, you know, obviously I think we're all really feeling the weight of this crisis, and, you know, our hearts really go out to our community and everybody that's currently being affected by this. You know, I think it's affecting us all in some very different ways, and also potentially some common threads as well. So I want to get into a little bit of that. But first, I kind of want to back up because I think that there is a bit of a movement happening with psychedelics in general, and in the way that, healing happens with psychedelics, and then in the way that those experiences are integrated as well. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about integration. And before I do, I also just want to share, anyone who's watching, if you have any specific questions for Sean, if you'd like me to ask them, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and we will definitely get to them kind of at the end of a few questions that I have as well. So integration is kind of a buzzword in the psychedelic sphere. What exactly is integration? What does it mean? Who's qualified? How does it work? Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really important concept to bring to psychedelic work and working with ayahuasca and other plant medicines. And really, especially when we're talking about working with ayahuasca, people are coming from, typically speaking, Western countries, and then having a retreat where they're engaging in ayahuasca in our center with the Shipibo tradition, and really encountering something that can be quite unfamiliar to the culture that they've grown up in and the other experiences they might have had. And so the concept of integration is really, how do we bring back those experiences into our normal life and integrate them into our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of the world, our understanding of consciousness, and making changes in our life based on that. And also, typically speaking, there will be a kind of...
Can you repeat that, Sean? Our understanding of ourselves, and then I think it might have...
Did I freeze?
I think either you or I did. Excuse the digital internet, everyone.
Yeah. So our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of the world, our understanding of our place in the world, our understanding of nature, our understanding of relationships. So it changes in many aspects of our being and our experience of life. And so the concept of integration is about, how do we take that forward into our life so that it becomes a part of our life, and not just, this amazing experience that we had over there that is not really something that we're kind of acting on. So also, another aspect of it is that, ayahuasca can really flush up a lot in us that requires ongoing work. So maybe traumas are coming up and they need to continue to be processed. And so integration is about that ongoing work. Might also be that we have experiences that are transcendental or altered states of consciousness, or significant challenges like that also have an onflow. Like we notice a significant change in our state of mind, and then we have to, in a way, integrate that into our life, our family, our community, our relationships. So it's to really signify the importance of all that we have this label integration for that whole process that goes on for sometimes weeks, months, sometimes years after the ceremony or retreat.
Certainly, and certainly experiences such as psychedelic experiences can bring up a lot of different aspects of the psyche and aspects of the self, and oftentimes can reveal our inner subconscious landscape. And so, I think it is really important for people to have the expectation that, those things aren't just going to necessarily be fixed overnight, and then, you're moving forward with your life completely healed. I mean, for my own personal experience, it feels like it's actually just a constant process of revisiting things and, maybe gaining deeper understandings each time. What would you say to people in terms of setting expectations for integration, after having this profoundly healing experience? What do you think people should kind of expect after that, if anything at all, in terms of their integration?
Yeah, it's an important consideration. I think we can even rewind and say, what should people do before they come? Because I think integration starts before we come, really. How we prepare for and ready ourselves to go through such an intense experience as working with ayahuasca. And so in the preparation phase, we really want to think about, okay, so I'm going to be encountering something that is going to be potentially extremely challenging on many levels. It can be really healing, it can be really inspiring, it can just be really confronting, it can be really beautiful, it can be really hellish. So essentially we want to look at what kind of support do we have in our life if challenges do come up. That's a really useful thing to consider. So do we have how much family support do we have? How much social support do we have? Do we have psychological processing skills? Do we have a spiritual practice? Do we practice yoga? Do we have things that are going to be able to stabilize us during a period of transition, which can be a really huge transition potentially? And then, of course, just being aware of our general mental health and being really honest with ourselves about what our mental health is like and how prepared we are to go through, potentially very intense experience like that. So if people have, complicated mental health conditions, like maybe they have some fairly complex trauma in their history that they know about, or maybe they have, things that come up for them when they're triggered that they know, they go into a state where they can't communicate very well, or they get really shut down, or they dissociate, or they, find it difficult to communicate how they're feeling. All of these things, we have to be really honest about that and think, well, what am I going to do if that happens as a result of going through this kind of experience, or or things get flushed up related to all of that as a result of going through this experience. And so we need to really take stock of that and be really honest with ourselves about it. And then, of course, there's the intention setting phase, which is really thinking, what do I want to get from this? Which might be to work on, important aspects of our life, be they our relationship, our sense of purpose in life, difficult emotions that we experience, different states of mind that we encounter that we're looking for healing from, or different things that we want to learn about and understand, and really making it an intentional process, because it's definitely not passive. And, if we characterize ayahuasca work as like coming into a relationship with this plant medicine and being a very active participant in the work of working through what's coming up and what we're being shown and what we're encountering. I have a fly where I live in the valley here. There's lots of flies, and they like to come and bother me when I'm sitting in front of the computer. So that's a very, very important aspect of the integration, is how we prepare. And so making sure we have the right support, making sure we really truly are ready, because it's arguable that in some cases people shouldn't drink, or they're not ready. And if they don't know about that, then we're happy to help them kind of assess things. If they, for example, apply to come to Soltara, we'll of course review their application and help people decide whether they're ready. So that's the sort of before phase. And then when it comes to kind of what should people expect, well, there's such a broad range of possible outcomes to going through a retreat or going through an ayahuasca ceremony that you essentially have to be willing to accept a full range of, in very rare instances, being completely underwhelmed by what's happened. Mm-hmm. So for some people, they might feel like, nothing much seems to have happened. That's pretty rare. A lot of people will experience some fairly significant shift in some aspect of their life and experience. So maybe they have a sense of really going into their shadow, going into their traumas, and really healing something in a really positive way that leaves them feeling really inspired, like something has really shifted in my life. And so for those people, a part of what they will experience is that they may need to do some ongoing work to carry that forward. And at some point afterwards, they may start to feel like, I'm not quite as shiny as I was when I first finished. So, people need to understand that it's not like you just burst through into this cloud of wonderful state of being healed and it stays like that forever. Typically speaking, at some point, it's like the sense of old habits coming back or old challenges coming back. And that has to be anticipated. But of course, there are plenty of things you can do to really continue that work, and further integrate, further heal, further improve on the amazing kind of shift and momentum that the initial experience gave us. And then for
that
some,
can be really hard for people too. For me, I know that was a really interesting part where, after my experience, and I did have a bit of an afterglow, my initial experience. And I was maybe a few weeks afterwards just feeling very elevated and euphoric. And then naturally that started to fade. But this was several years ago when integration was kind of touched on, but it wasn't really, those types of expectations weren't fully set for me. And so, I know in my case, it was really difficult because I felt almost as if, I was failing my own healing process, or perhaps, I just wasn't actually I wasn't even good enough to heal, or that, I was doing something wrong, or that ayahuasca was mad at me. And so, getting caught up in these stories, which, turned out to be very, very deep stories for myself. But, after kind of going through this euphoric experience that was very impactful, and then almost feeling worse in a sense, because then I felt shame that I didn't maintain that healed state longer after that.
Yeah, that's a really good remark, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I can relate to that too. And this is where our, all our conditioned belief systems start to come into play, and the judgments that we make of what is actually a natural process, but then we personalize it and start to blame ourselves and have all these judgments about ourselves, about what's coming up. So that's a really useful thing to be aware of in advance as well. The number of people who said the medicine doesn't like me. To me, this kind of thing, and so many different examples of that, like you say. So
and then it takes some time to kind of, for me it was a long time before I realized that it wasn't that, in that moment the medicine didn't like me, it was that I didn't like me still. And that was something that was being brought up for me to actually assess and look at. But I was maybe too focused on the story of it and getting lost in that pattern, which was a very deep pattern for me. To actually be like, oh, this is what's coming up. This is actually something for me to look at. And it's potentially part of the purging process even, or can be viewed that way, I suppose.
Yeah. And I like to even broaden it as well and say, look, this is a part of what we're healing as a culture, because, you don't just, or I don't just come up with these about myself in a vortex. They occur, within the culture that we grew up in. They were essentially set up by our culture to have the potential to believe I'm not good enough, or people don't like me, or the medicine doesn't like me. This is very much a cultural phenomenon, and I'm sure for the people listening, loads of people out there will be able to relate to these kind of thoughts coming up through their mind when they go through challenging experiences. And so if we start to realize that it's actually, whilst we're having the personal experience of it, but it's actually not entirely personal. It's a part of our entire culture. It's a part of the history. It's a part of what everyone's working through together. Then we can start to say, okay, that's right. Yeah, I have to face this for myself, but actually it's normal to be experiencing this kind of thing.
Bit of a collective trauma too that we're kind of
absolutely through. Yeah, we don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah. Well, speaking of collective trauma, obviously right now the whole world is sort of together in this collective trauma, this crisis that is having, creating different personal experiences for everyone. And, I think a majority of our community, if not all of our community, is probably experiencing some form of restriction in terms of gathering and potentially movement, stay at home, quarantine, recommendations and rules. Obviously, this is proven difficult for all of us. And I think, one thing that I know myself and my people close to me are having trouble with is just the lack of being able to personally interact with others, and so we are social creatures, and virtual is wonderful and technology is amazing, and it's still not the same. And so I'm wondering if maybe you can talk a little bit about psychologically why this is difficult for people, and kind of give a sense of the different ranges of what might be coming up for or showing up for people, and then potentially we'll get into a little bit of things we can do to help ourselves in this. But what could be coming up now for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it. The huge thing is we're social creatures. We're built to be in contact with other people, to have lots of physical contact, lots of personal connection with people, and in the absence of that, that's a trigger for all sorts of mental health troubles and challenges, it's extremely stressful not to be able to be in social contact with other people. Typically speaking, if people are going to go into isolation, if you look at the different traditions where there are practices involving isolation, including the Shipibo tradition, there's a structure to it. It's done at certain times. It's done in very ritual manner, and there are practices that people are going to be engaging in whilst they go through that. And so if you just thrown into a state of isolation without any kind of structure surrounding it, then it's a totally different kettle of fish. It tends to be really, really distressing, stressful situation. Not to mention, of course, the huge amount of uncertainty around what's going on. The process of, for good scientists and, medical staff who are investigating what this virus actually is and how it works and how to best deal with it, it's a long and uncertain process of, filtering through massive amounts of information to try and figure something out. And so for other people who aren't themselves able to, obviously it's stressful for the people working in that field, trying to figure it all out, as well as the people providing medical care. But for the people who aren't directly involved in that, a lot of hopelessness is going to be coming up for people. Definitely a lot of worrying and anxiety. Obviously, there are people whose, family members or themselves might be actually getting sick with this or other things. And I know it's hugely traumatic for a lot of people that when people are sick, they're separated because of the quarantining, within the hospitals, that people aren't allowed to go and visit their family members in hospital. And there are people who are out there who are dying alone, which, obviously is an incredibly distressing experience, and for them and for their family members not to be able to be close to them while they're going through that. And then, of course, even for the people who are just at home and they're not ill, or the people, they know around them, they don't necessarily affected by that directly, still there's a lot of people who are becoming unemployed, or a lot of people who are experiencing a lot of financial uncertainty, and that's going to be creating a lot of stress and worry for people. And so, I think a lot of people are going to be experiencing heightened anxiety and a lot of worrying. A lot of people are going to be experiencing hopelessness, symptoms of depression, symptoms of, mourning and loss of, people who are sick, of course, and also loss of the previous lifestyle. Can bring up a sense of grieving, even of a different kind. And then, like you mentioned, with the kind of thoughts that come up, will be some of those similar types of thoughts. A lot of people are going to be thinking they're useless, or thinking they're not good enough. A lot of people are going to be, for example, comparing themselves to other people who appear to be dealing with things better or more effectively or more constructively. And then a lot of people that just have extra stresses on where maybe before they had their, if they're people who have families with children, maybe the children are at home now as well, and so they're trying to be, homeschooling, which is something they've maybe never done before, never really wanted to do, don't feel particularly effective at, and it's stressful for them and it's stressful for their kids. So a lot of people are going to be experiencing also, stresses within the family, stresses within relationships. Maybe people are, essentially quarantined with people they're in a relationship with who maybe they really love, but they're just not used to being in this kind of locked down environment where they just have each other, or have much less access to their normal ways of going out and other things that would be taking up their time. And so there's a lot of people experiencing stress in relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Just, thinking certainly there's, the factor of public health, and, we want, of course, that to be the number one priority. And at the same time, I think it is really important to talk about all of these different potentially long-term effects of, what that actually means. It's, I've been talking with some friends and family about, it's a little bit some people are a little bit frustrated with the kind of approach of, oh, just stay home, it's not that big of a deal, and someone told me like that, it's unfortunate and it's frustrating because nobody's actually talking about the serious toll that can take in all these different ways on one's mental health. And for those who are already suffering from mental health illnesses, that it's exacerbating them exponentially, and then those who have experienced or are experiencing different types of hardships as a result of that, are kind of going into these states that it's really hard to necessarily come out of when we're told to just be home and don't go see anybody and don't go out. And
Exactly.
you can only go to the beach for this amount of time. You can only go to the park for a few hours a day, something like that, if you even have access to a park. So yeah, I think it's really important to touch on all of these things because it's not necessarily quite so simple as just this is what we have to do and everyone should just do it and then we'll be fine. It's going to have some fallout.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really, really difficult situation for people to be faced with all of that, and I know a lot of people are feeling really resentful of the restrictions that have been imposed, but obviously the intention there is to really protect from the worst possible spread of the illness. And the people in hospitals are really the ones who've seen it firsthand, and the people who've experienced family members going through it or gone through it themselves know that this is nothing to be trifled with. And so, but then for the people at home, and absolutely that was going to be my next point, that definitely people with existing mental health problems, it's going to be exacerbating it, because whatever we're living with in our life, we will develop strategies to manage that. And so now essentially many of the strategies that we will have to manage it have been taken off the table. And so and then even particular conditions like, for example, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is actually a significant percentage of people have aspects of that. If they have, for example, contamination fears, then right now they're going to be going through the roof with all of that. So everyone's kind of impacted in their own way, depending on exactly how their mind operates and how they respond to stresses and how they respond to being isolated and all the kinds of things, and limited in being able to go out and all the things we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely this word is thrown around a lot, but I think it's really true. This is an unprecedented time. And, I think you also touched on there being just a lot of uncertainty around, what exactly is going to happen and how long this is going to last. And it's almost like having no endpoint can sometimes make it a little bit more difficult too.
Absolutely.
So, obviously we're in this state. What are some strategies, within the space that we're in and this kind of new way of life that we are, being put into? What would you say are some strategies that you found might be helpful for people to kind of deal with this and move through it?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I think is sort of really essential aspect of it all is to really just make space for whatever we happen to be feeling about all of this, and to just mindfully allow ourselves to experience and go through whatever emotions arise as they come, because typically speaking, when we start to encounter feelings of anxiety, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of grieving, whatever is coming up for people, feelings of anger, frustration, boredom, whatever it may be, a lot of people's first response to that is to try and push the feeling away or get rid of it. But actually, paradoxically, what that tends to do is suppress it and stop it from actually being processed. So in order for us to move through all of these feelings as they're coming up, the first thing we have to do is actually let them come up, let them be felt and experienced. And so, yeah, really, that would be my first recommendation, is to just normalize that. As we say, it's like important to talk about this and say, people are going to be experiencing all kinds of really difficult things, and that's normal, really, honestly. It's going to be really, I would say, it's likely to be the exception to the rule that people are just totally fine with all this. Most people are going to be experiencing the impact of it in some way, and so it's just really, as best as you can, be accepting of that and make space for what you're feeling. And so alongside that and consistent with that, to be really, really compassionate, first of all to yourself, and second of all to everybody else, however they happen to be reacting. Even if the way people are reacting, you don't understand it, or you don't agree with some of the stuff they're saying, or what they're focusing on within all of this, just be compassionate to the fact that we get triggered how we get triggered, and we react how we react. And yes, we can work through some of those things and change those things over time. But for the most part, a lot of people's initially will just react. And so we really, and that's what they, based on everything that they've been conditioned to believe and perceive, the traumas that they have experienced in the past, and their life circumstances and socioeconomic circumstances, cultural circumstances, all the things that are affecting how this situation impacts them, which are going to vary tremendously for lots of people. So be really compassionate towards ourselves for our own reactions to it, and really compassionate towards other people for what they're going through. And also just try not to compare ourselves too much to what everyone else appears to be doing, especially not how people appear on social media, because, you know, like social media is really, which is where a lot of us at the moment are getting direct insight. You know, that's the sort of area we can still see into each other's lives a bit. But of course, you know, as people know, but we occasionally need to be reminded, it's very curated. You know, people tend to be very selective about what they put up there, and they don't say, you know, here's me feeling really bummed out doing nothing and not knowing what to do, or here's me being extremely anxious and thinking I'm useless, or whatever it may be, right? Which, oh, here's this funny thing I thought of, or here's this cool thing I did. So it and then when you see a whole stream of that, that can be really triggering for a lot of people. So yeah, as best as we can, not to compare ourselves to that stuff too directly. Also try to just take care of our general well-being, like of course sleep patterns. If you've lost your daily routine, this happens to me for sure, like without my normal daily routine, it's really easy for me to get a bit of insomnia, to start to lose motivation to go to bed, or lose motivation to get up as early, which means that then I don't get tired as early, and then the sleep routine goes out the window. And yeah, so sleep has a huge impact on our state of well-being and our state of mind. So to really look after that, and you know, take time to wind down in the evening, get good sleep. Obviously, food and diet, everybody knows the importance of that. But again, when we're already stressed, it's really easy to, you know, start to eat more sugar or drink more coffee, or eat the easy food rather than, you know, prepare a solid meal. And then of course that you know, feeds into that cycle of anxiety levels and stress. And so if we look after our food and try and eat a really healthy, balanced diet, and you know, time to cook for ourselves if we can, that can make a big difference too. Obviously, getting whatever exercise we can. You know, I mean, the level of restriction is different in different places, but even if you can't get out much, then doing some exercises at home, you know, basic calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups. I sometimes jogging on the spot, whatever comes to, you know, whatever's available to you.
Music video.
Yeah, right, exactly. Dance like nobody is watching, because this time they really are not. So
that has been something that I've really utilized, is just trying to find some movement, because I do tend to get very stagnant when I am sort of just by myself and with my own thoughts, and, you know, maybe feeling a little bit anxious or depressed, and, you know, eating maybe not the healthiest food. And so then that kind of lulls me into sort of a more sedentary state. And I know how much movement can just help shake off and get the lymphatic system moving, getting, you know, your blood to your brain again, and things like that. And so yeah, that's definitely I think an underutilized tool in my life for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, me too. I definitely know, and it's definitely, it's an observed process when people experience low mood or depression, which a lot of people will be experiencing to some extent within all of this, that we lose our motivation. To like, we just can't be bothered kind of getting started with stuff. And so, yeah, to just do whatever is on hand, even just a little bit, like to dance around like an idiot or do whatever is available to you, really, just to get things moving. It's very, very helpful.
Right. One thing too that I felt has been helpful for me in recent days is very intentional titration of consuming social media, because you kind of touched on that before, where it's very easy to sort of compare. And then also, you know, across the different platforms, you know, there's a lot of news, and, you know, YouTube has just like a lot of ideas about what's happening and what's going on. And it just seems like it's kind of this constant barrage of, you know, a lot of fear and uncertainty, and just kind of more contributing to that. And so, you know, lately for me, something that's really helped is to really kind of block times where I look at my phone or, you know, watch YouTube videos or something like that. But I'll try and really be like, what is my purpose to using my phone right now? I want to connect with my mom. I want to, you know, connect with a friend or something like that, and try and really be very like intentional about, rather than just kind of like hitting the next, you know, YouTube video and just continuing to watch it, because it can be really easy to get sucked into that. And, you know, for me, it definitely raises my anxiety levels, but at the same time, it's highly addicting. And so it's like
it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's designed to be. It's
Right.
like one of the sad facts of you know, things like social media and all these processes. All these really bright minds have gone into how to make this thing as addictive as possible, and they've basically hacked into our dopamine system essentially. And it's, you know, we know that from the researching and understanding of addiction and the way that dopamine works is that we will keep doing things that make us feel bad ultimately if it gives us a dopamine kick.
Yes.
And so I think, yeah, it's really sort of, it's like a weakness in our psyche that's being exploited in many ways. But I think there's, you know, is what you talked about, having like a titration of it is a very sensible approach to it. Like we really do have to do something to make sure. And then the thing is, if we actually, I was watching a video on this recently, which is really interesting, that if we give ourselves that, you know, like a kind of dieta from that, like, you know, if we give ourselves some time off from that, and actually focus on other things that might give us less of that initial kick, over, and go through the boredom of letting go of that, you know, sense of constant simulation, our system starts to rebalance over time.
Did we watch the same video?
Maybe we did.
We might have. There's a great, I'll post it in the comments for people watching.
Okay, cool.
The one that I saw is from Better Than Yesterday, which is that is a very productive.
Yeah, I watched the same one.
Is that the one? Okay, perfect.
We were scrolling the same feeds.
I was like, oh, something that, you know, could actually be useful in my life. And that's a great point, right? It's like we are.
It's important.
Yeah, and we're so wired to, you know, want that sort of dopamine fix. It's just chemically the way it works. And so, yeah, taking a bit of a detox from that can actually make it so that the less boring, perhaps, but more long-term goals that
more
we
fulfilling,
want,
right?
more fulfilling long-term, might actually feel more interesting in the moment. So then we do them, and it's a positive cycle. It's a great,
I think, and we're especially vulnerable to that problem at times like this, because, you know, as we're less able to go out and stimulate ourselves, and we're like, okay, how do I keep myself going? And then, but we don't want to get hooked on the cheap fix.
Right. So, exactly. Well, I want to keep this, you know, relatively on time. So I do just want to go through some of the questions. Looks like people have asked some, if that's all right. Did you have anything else you wanted to add regarding kind of general health maintenance?
I mean, there's so many things people can do. I think one other one, which probably just to finish with, is if we find yourself caught in worrying, which I'm sure a lot of people are doing, really within that, see if you can focus on what can I take action on realistically, and focus our attention there. And then don't be afraid to ask for help if there's things that we can't do ourselves, but, you know, we know something needs to be done about, because a lot of people will probably be once we become isolated, we kind of, it feels like more effort to connect. It feels like more effort to ask for help. So yeah, always that encouragement. Don't hesitate to reach out to other people. And a lot of people are really happy to hear from anybody right now. So
yeah, very, very true. And yeah, it's certainly connecting with loved ones. And I'll also go ahead and share that you're currently offering reduced rate and donation-based integration sessions, mental health sessions, package deals as well. If people are experiencing some financial hardship, happy to work with you on that. So I think the link for the discounted sessions is in the description of this video as well. So certainly reach out, and yeah, it's definitely it can be hard to do, but I know I always feel better when I actually do that.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. Thank you for that, Sean. All right, so then we'll just go through some of these questions here. So Jeffrey, hi Jeffrey, says, can you overdose on ayahuasca?
Technically speaking, yes, you can, but it's practically impossible to do that because the amount you would have to drink in order for that to occur, you just wouldn't be able to get it down, basically. And certainly,
we're talking like gallons here, or
I don't know the actual amount.
Okay.
I'm sure someone
more
does.
than your stomach would let you hold.
You would get nowhere near it. You would be vomiting ferociously for a very long time and experiencing, you physically wouldn't be able to get it into you, and you psychologically wouldn't be able to take it, as far as I would understand things. I mean, not that I would encourage anyone to try and, but no, I think it's very, very safe on that front in terms of actually overdosing. It is possible to potentially drink too much and have an overwhelmingly strong experience, and certainly I wouldn't go about trying to figure that out for yourself. For example, when people will come and drink with us at Soltara, the facilitators and the maestros are sitting there with them, helping them dose it out, and people don't pour for themselves. The maestro will pour for them, and so through working with lots of people, we have a pretty decent knowledge of what's a reasonable amount for most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the typical dose is, somewhere around a shot glass worth, not even necessarily a full one. So
yeah,
that
depends very much on the strength of the brew as well. But obviously we're working with a somewhat standardized strength.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So Ernesto asks, I realize most retreat centers are closed during this period of lockdowns and shut borders, but I was wondering if you're seeing signs of what demand will be like once people are able to move a bit. Do you have a sense of how many people are making new queries, checking your websites, etc., during this period of high stress and uncertainty? I can speak to that a little bit.
You,
yeah. So there's definitely still an interest. I think there's a lot of people that are actually really looking forward to just a little bit more healing. Unfortunately, we did have to reschedule our retreats here at Soltara through August, and that's obviously been something that people have been planning for and looking forward to, and so many of them are looking forward to coming as soon as things become safe again. Other people are affected in different ways by this crisis, and are kind of, or maybe this isn't the right time, but from my side of things, it certainly seems like there will be a bit of a backlog of interest in doing this, in particular people that are going through hard times and really looking to come out on the other side and have something to look forward to and something to help them. All righty. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody. It seems like, unfortunately, the live stream might have cut out on Facebook, which is a shame because Sean was answering some great questions. What we'll do is we'll actually go in and just share a few thoughts of our own in the comments, to just reply directly to those comments. I do want to just ask one final question to you, Sean, that Sylvia brought up, which is, Sean, what does it look like to make space? When you said the first thing we should do is make space, what does that mean? What are some examples?
Okay. Yeah, so that's a great question, and obviously something that, there's a learning process involved in learning how to be with our feelings without resisting them. But essentially, what he means is to bring our attention, or one way to functionalize it, one way to practice it, is to focus our attention into the emotions as they're located in our body. So the somatic, physiological, emotional feeling, which might be appearing, for example, in our heart area or our solar plexus or our stomach or our throat, typically. So the core of the body is where the feelings are showing up most of the time. And to allow it to be there as opposed to trying to get rid of it. And so it's consistent with mindfulness, for those people who are familiar with mindfulness, which essentially is experiencing something that's going on without resisting it. So experiencing our feeling being there without resisting it, and in a sense turning attention towards it, rather than to try and push it away or immediately distract away from it by doing something else. So that's a really kind of brief description of something that actually can be also described in much longer terms too. Much more,
Sure.
like
that's really helpful. I think that so much of our society really tends towards the latter issues of kind of distracting people from it, and maybe suppressing it or turning away from it. And this is like a bit of a counterintuitive to maybe what a lot of us have been taught on how to cope with things.
People typically predict that if they let their feelings be, they're going to get worse. And so then and so therefore we never actually learn what happens if you actually let a feeling be, which essentially is it comes, it stays for a while, and it passes. And so I actually, and in that process of experiencing it, we, there's a felt sense experience, which is not easy to always put into words, but where we feel like we've understood something. We feel like it has passed through us rather than got stuck quite as much as it might otherwise.
Yeah, and for me, it's also that's kind of where just movement, even if it's just taking a walk, has been super helpful with just letting my body process it necessarily if my mind is not willing or able to in the moment as well.
Yeah, it's always okay if you don't have the capacity to be with the feeling. There's no judgment of that either. It's actually okay. However we get through stuff, it's okay, right? Because these are just there for people if it's available to them.
Wonderful. Really, really powerful stuff. Thank you so much. I definitely want to do this again. We're going to be doing a little bit of a mini series in kind of continuing this conversation and some more general mental health tips and integration tips as well. So just want to say sincerely, thank you so much, Sean, for taking the time and
thanks, Mel.
Sharing your wisdom. And for others, there is a virtual integration circle today at 4 p.m. PST, which is the 6th of May.
50 minutes.
For people who are who have maybe watched this live. And then, our next video will kind of continue our discussion on general mental health tips, including some ways we can maybe remove some barriers to resistance and allow our processes to unfold more easily. So stay tuned for that. And just to reiterate, Sean is offering package and individual session discounts. Link will be in the description. And please do send us requests for future video topics. We'd love to know what it is that you guys would like to hear and learn more about. This has been a really fruitful discussion. So anything else to add, Sean?
Just thanks everyone for joining in, and absolutely we would love to hear your feedback and questions. And thanks very much, Mel, for facilitating and hosting it. It's been great to connect with you and talk to you here.
Cheers. Well, thank you so much. Sorry everyone for the technical glitches there at the end, and just wishing everybody just so much safety and health, and in solidarity, we're here with you guys. Our hearts go out to every single person out there. So thank you, and yeah, stay safe. All right, thanks, Sean.
Bye, Mel. Bye, everyone.
Bye.